video, I showed how to make half square triangles if you just needed one or multiples of the same half square triangle. Now in this video, I'm going to show you how to make half square triangles if you need a ton of the same half square triangle. So let me show you a method where you make 8 half square triangles at a time. Kelly Richardson here from Kelly's Creative Comforts. So with this method for making half square triangles, you start with 2 squares that are the same size, one light, one dark, or at least 2 contrasting squares. We're going to put those together and we're going to get 8 half square triangles out of these 2 squares. So the math is not tricky, but it's already done for you. In the description, you will find that there is a download link for a printable sheet to the math, so you can keep that on board. And now that the math is already done for you, let's get started. To demonstrate this method, I am going to use a layer cake that I picked up somewhere. This is a beautiful layer cake. And what I'm going to need is the 10-inch square of the layer cake and 10-inch squares of background fabric, as long as there's some contrast. So this particular layer cake, I just got some coordinating background fabric and cut that up into 10-inch squares as well. So I'm just going to randomly pick one of these squares. There's a nice dark one. So I'm going to take that one and put that off to the side, and I want one of my background squares. Now, you will get, depending on what size square you start with, you're going to of course get all different sizes of half square triangles. This one here is going to give me 4-inch finished half square triangles. You also need to understand a little bit of the difference between when we talk about finished or raw, or unfinished. So a finished half square triangle refers to the size of the triangle once it is sewn into the block. A unfinished half square triangle would be half an inch bigger than that. So for instance, 2 10-inch squares, a dark and a light, are going to give me 8 4-inch finished or 8 4.5-inch unfinished half square triangles. And don't worry about the math. Click that link below. So what we're going to do, we start off with taking them and layering them right sides together. Now I'm going to take a ruler, and as long as it will go from corner to corner, you're fine. My regular 12-inch wouldn't, so I've brought this other ruler in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw 2 lines. So my first line, I want to make sure I'm drawing from this tip, right on the tip, all the way down to that tip right there. And I'm just using a friction pen. And then I'm going to draw right from this tip all the way to that tip. So all it requires is drawing an X on your fabric right from corner to corner. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch away from each side of this line. So 1/4 from here, 1/4 from there. So I'll see you at the sewing machine. So here I am at the sewing machine. I am going to put my machine move my needle over to 1/4 inch sewing position. I'm going to line this edge up with my foot, and I'm just going to go ahead and sew. Okay, back from the ironing board. Now I have pressed this. I find that setting the seam kind of relaxes the stitches and makes it lie down nice and flat. The only problem is this is a friction pen, which means it's heat erased, so my marks went away and I had to put them back on again. No big deal. Okay, now what I'm going to try to do, if you happen to have a rotary mat that turns, a rotary cutting mat that turns, it's a great idea to use it. If you don't, just spin your mat around. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am now going to cut here and here before I cut my long lines. So I want to line my ruler up, and I want to make sure that I am nice and straight here and that I am right on where those seams converge. So right there, where these seams converge right here And here is where I want to make sure that I have my ruler. So I'm going to lay it on there. So I'm straight here. So I'm straight here, and I am lined up right down there, and I'm straight across the bottom. And that is going to be my first cut. I'm going to cut like that. Now, without moving the fabric, I'm just going to spin my board. Now I want to do the same thing on this side. So again, I'm lining up to make sure that I'm nice and straight across here and that I'm right in those two seams right there. And I'm going to cut that way. Now we're going to cut the diagonals. Here, it's not such a big deal if you move them now because we've actually got a line to line up on. So you can pull those across and just cut on all your diagonals. There you go. And now you have 8 half square triangles. So I'm going to take these over to the ironing board and get them all pressed out towards the dark. Okay, back from the ironing board, I have my half square triangles pressed. I've pressed them all towards the dark. Now you can also press the seams open. I don't tend to. I like them pressed towards the dark. And all of these half square triangles finish up at very, very close to 4.5. So remember, they were to be 4-inch finished, and finished means once they're sewn into the block. So I really want these to be 4.5. So now I will just go through and I will square them all up. I need to square them up, and we're just going to be taking off nubbins. I just love it when that happens. So here we go. I'm using a ruler, and as long as your ruler has a diagonal on it, it is perfectly fine to use. So when I line this up, I want to line the ruler directly on top of that diagonal. Make sure that it's right on top of the diagonal. And on my first pass, I want to be a little bit over 4.5 all the way around, making sure that I still have something to trim off here. So as I said, in this case, I just have nubbins. And I always do both sides of the half square triangle. I'll do these sides first, and then I'll flip it and do the other sides. Because if I line my 4.5 up here, just doing the 4.5 and just cut that off, this side is still a little bit wonky. So there we go. Got it lined up so that I'm over the 4.5. And I'm just going to cut. And see, look at that. I'm just taking off nubbins. Flip it around. Line it up here. Now this time when I line it up, I'm lining it up exactly on the 4.5, so I have my diagonal lined up perfectly. This is on the 4.5, this one's on the 4.5, and there we go, nubbins. So I will do that with all my half square triangles. Now, after squaring up all those 8 half square triangles, this is the total of waste that I have from those 2 10-inch squares. So that is a very good use of fabric when you need to make a ton of half square triangles. And they are just so much fun to play with. You can make a ton of different designs just from half square triangles. So here we have a pinwheel. Here we have another design just by spinning them around. Spin them around again and you can start to get striped looks. The possibilities are endless with half square triangles. So there you have it. That is my favorite method when I need to make a lot of half square triangles from the fabric. It is super easy, it is very accurate, and it is very, very little waste of fabric. So I really like that technique for all of those reasons. So don't forget, you don't have to do the math. It's in the description. There's a link there. Just print that off and that will give you all the math that you need to complete any size half square triangle that you're looking for. Now, as I was filming this video and playing around with all the different patterns that you can do with a half square triangle, I actually came up with an idea for a quilt. So check back with me in a couple of weeks and I will show you the quilt that I've come up with these half square triangles. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day and happy sewing!